Section 9 of the Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Christina Vasilevsky. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 9. Chapter 46. The Different Kinds of Winds. The ancients reckoned only 4 winds, nor indeed does Homer mention more, corresponding to the 4 parts of the world, a very poor reason as we now consider it. The next generation added 8 others, but this was too refined and minute a division. The moderns have taken a middle course, and out of this great number have added 4 to the original set. There are, therefore, 2 in each of the 4 quarters of the heavens. From the equinoctial rising of the sun proceeds Subsolanus, and from his brunal rising, Volturnus. The former is named by the Greeks Apeliotes, the latter Eurus. From the south we have Auster, and from the brunal setting of the sun Africus. These were named Notos and Libs. From the equinoctial setting proceeds Favonius, and from the solstitial setting Chorus. These were named Zephyrus and Argestes. From the 7 stars comes Septemtio, between which and the solstitial rising we have Aquilo, named Aparctius and Boreas. By a more minute subdivision we interpose 4 others: Thrascius, between Septemio and the solstitial setting; Caesius, between Aquilo and the equinoctial rising; and Phonices, between the brunal rising and the south. And also, at an equal distance from the south and the winter setting between Libs and Notos, and compounded of the 2, is Libonotos. Nor is this all. For some persons have added a wind, which they have named Maces, between Boreas and Caesius, and one between Urius and Notos, named Euronotus. There are also certain winds peculiar to certain countries, which do not extend beyond certain districts, as Scyron in Attica, deviating a little from Argestes, and not known in the other parts of Greece. In other places it is a little higher on the card, and is named Olympius, but all these have gone by the name of Argestes. In some places Caesius is named Hellespontia, and the same is done in other cases. In the province of Narbonne the most noted wind is Circeus. It is not inferior to any of the winds in violence, frequently driving the waves before it, to Ostia straight across the Ligurian Sea. Yet this same wind is unknown in other parts, not even reaching Vienne, a city in the same province, for meeting with the high ridge of hills, just before it arrives at that district it is checked, although it be the most violent of all the winds. Fabius also asserts that the south winds never penetrate into Egypt. Hence this law of nature is obvious, that the winds have their stated seasons and limits. Chapter 47. The Periods of the Winds. The spring opens the seas for the navigators. In the beginning of this season the west winds soften, as it were, the winter sky, the sun having now gained the 25th degree of Aquarius. This is on the 6th day before the Ides of February. This agrees, for the most part, with all the remarks that I shall subsequently make, only anticipating the period by 1 day in the intercalary year, and again preserving the same order in the succeeding lustrum. After the 8th day before the calends of March, Favonius is called by some Chelidonius, from the swallows making their appearance. The wind, which blows for the space of 9 days, from the 71st day after the winter solstice, is sometimes called Ornithius, from the arrival of the birds. In the contrary direction to Favonius is the wind which we name Subsolanus, and this is connected to the rising of the Virgilii in the 25th degree of Taurus, 6 days before the Ides of May, which is the time when the south winds prevail. These are opposite to Septemtio. The Dog star rises in the hottest time of the summer, when the sun is entering the 1st degree of Leo. This is 15 days before the calends of August. The north winds, which are called prodromi, precede its rising by about 8 days. But in 2 days after its rising, the same north winds, which are named Etesiae, blow more constantly during this period. The vapor from the sun, being increased twofold by the heat of this star, is supposed to render these winds more mild, nor are there any which are more regular. After these, the south winds become more frequent, until the appearance of Arcturus, which rises 11 days before the autumnal equinox. At this time Chorus sets in. Chorus is an autumnal wind, and is in the opposite direction to Volturnus. After this, and generally 44 days after the equinox, at the setting of the Vergiliae, the winter commences, which usually happens on the 3rd of the Ides of November. This is the period of the winter north wind, which is very unlike the summer north wind, and which is in the opposite direction to Africus. For 7 days before the winter solstice, and for the same length of time after it, the sea becomes calm, in order that the kingfishers may rear their young. From this circumstance they have obtained the name of the halcyon days. The rest of the season is winterly. Yet the severity of the storms does not entirely close up the sea. In former times, pirates were compelled by the fear of death to rush into death, and to brave the winter ocean. Now we are driven to it by avarice. Chapter 48. The nature of the winds. Those are the coldest winds which are said to blow from the 7 stars, and Chorus, which is contiguous to them, these also restrain the others and dispel the clouds. The moist winds are Africus, and still more the Auster of Italy. It is said that in Pontus, Caesius attracts the clouds. The dry winds are Chorus and Volturnus, especially when they are about to cease blowing. The winds that bring snow are Aquilo and Septentrio. Septentrio brings hail, and so does Chorus. Auster is sultry. Volturnus and Zephyrus are warm. These winds are more dry than Subsolanus, and generally those which blow from the north and west are more dry than those which blow from the south and east. Aquilo is the most healthy of them all. Auster is unhealthy, and more so when dry. It is colder, perhaps because it is moist. Animals are supposed to have less appetite for food when this wind is blowing. The Etesiae generally cease during the night, and spring up at the 3rd hour of the day. In Spain and in Asia these winds have an easterly direction, in Pontus a northerly, and in other places a southerly direction. They blow also after the winter solstice, when they are called Ornithiae, but they are more gentle and continue only for a few days. There are 2 winds which change their nature with their situation. In Africa, Auster is attended with a clear sky, while Aquilo collects the clouds. Almost all winds blow in their turn, so that when one ceases its opposite springs up. When winds which are contiguous succeed each other, they go from left to right, in the direction of the sun. The 4th day of the moon generally determines their direction for the whole of the monthly period. We are able to sail in opposite directions by means of the same wind, if we have the sails properly set. Hence it frequently happens that in the night vessels going in different directions run against each other. Auster produces higher winds than Aquilo, because the former blows, as it were, from the bottom of the sea, while the latter blows on the surface. It is therefore after south winds that the most mischievous earthquakes have occurred. Auster is the more violent during the night, Aquilo during the day. Winds from the east continue longer than from the west. The north winds generally cease blowing on the odd days, and we observe the prevalence of the odd numbers in many other parts of nature. The male winds are therefore regulated by the odd numbers. The sun sometimes increases and sometimes restrains winds. When rising and setting it increases them, while, when on the meridian, it restrains them during the summer. They are therefore generally lulled during the middle of the day and of the night, because they are abated either by excessive cold or heat. Winds are also lulled by showers. We generally expect them to come from that quarter where the clouds open and allow the clear sky to be seen. Eudoxus supposes that the same succession of changes occurs in them after a period of 4 years, if we observe their minute revolutions, and this applies not only to winds, but to whatever concerns the state of the weather. He begins his lustrum at the rising of the Dog star in the intercalary year. So far concerning winds in general. Chapter 49. Ecnethius and Typhon. And now respecting the sudden gusts which arising from the exhalations of the earth, as has been said above, and falling down again, being in the meantime covered by a thin film of clouds, exist in a variety of forms. By their wandering about and rushing down like torrents, in the opinion of some persons they produce thunder and lightning. But if they be urged on with greater force and violence, so as to cause the rupture of a dry cloud, they produce a squall, which is named by the Greeks eknephias. But if these are compressed, and rolled up more closely together, and then break without any discharge of fire, i.e. without thunder, they produce a squall, which is named typhon, or an eknephias in a state of agitation. It carries along a portion of the cloud which it has broken off, rolling it and turning it round, aggravating its own destruction by the weight of it, and whirling it from place to place. This is very much dreaded by sailors, as it not only breaks their sail yards, but the vessels themselves, bending them about in various ways. This may be a slight degree counteracted by sprinkling it with vinegar, when it comes near us, this substance being of a very cold nature. This wind, when it rebounds after the stroke, absorbs and carries up whatever it may have seized on. Chapter 50. Tornadoes, blasting winds, whirlwinds, and other wonderful kinds of tempests. But if it burst from the cavity of a cloud which is more depressed, but less capacious than what produces a squall, and is accompanied by noise, it is called a whirlwind, and throws down everything which is near it. The same, when it is more burning and rages with greater heat, is called a blasting wind, scorching and at the same time throwing down everything with which it comes in contact. Typhon never comes from the north, nor have we eknephias when it snows, or when there is snow on the ground. If it breaks the clouds, and at the same time catches fire or burns, but not until it has left the cloud, it forms a thunderbolt. It differs from prester as flame does from fire. The former is diffused in a gust, the latter is condensed with a violent impulse. The whirlwind, when it rebounds, differs from the tornado in the same manner as a loud noise does from a dash. The squall differs from both of them in its extent, the clouds being more properly rent asunder than broken into pieces. A black cloud is formed, resembling a great animal, an appearance much dreaded by sailors. It is also called a pillar, when the moisture is so condensed and rigid as to be able to support itself. It is a cloud of the same kind, which, when drawn into a tube, sucks up the water. Chapter 51. Of thunder. In what countries it does not fall, and for what reason. Thunder is rare both in winter and in summer, but from different causes. The air, which is condensed in the winter, is made still more dense by a thicker covering of clouds, while the exhalations from the earth, being all of them rigid and frozen, extinguish whatever fiery vapor it may receive. It is this cause which exempts Scythia and the cold districts round it from thunder. On the other hand, the excessive heat exempts Egypt, the warm and dry vapors of the earth being very seldom condensed, and that only into light clouds. But in the spring and autumn, thunder is more frequent, the causes which produce summer and winter being in each season less efficient. From this cause thunder is more frequent in Italy, the air being more easily set in motion, in consequence of a milder winter and a showery summer, so that it may be said to be always spring or autumn. Also, in those parts of Italy which recede from the north and lie toward the south, as in the district round our city and in Campania, it lightens equally both in winter and in summer, which is not the case in other situations. Chapter 52. Of the different kinds of lightning and their wonderful effects. We have accounts of many different kinds of thunderstorms. Those which are dry do not burn objects, but dissipate them, while those which are moist do not burn, but blacken them. There is a third kind, which is called bright lightning, of a very wonderful nature, by which casks are emptied without the vessels themselves being injured, or there being any other trace left of their operation. Gold, copper, and silver are melted, while the bags which contain them are not in the least burned, nor even the wax seal much defaced. Marcia, a lady of high rank at Rome, was struck while pregnant. The fetus was destroyed, while she herself survived without suffering any injury. Among the prognostics which took place at the time of Catiline's conspiracy, M. Herennius, a magistrate of the borough of Pompeii, was struck by lightning when the sky was without clouds. Chapter 53. The Etrurian and the Roman observations on these points. The Tuscan books inform us that there are 9 gods who discharge thunderstorms, that there are 11 different kinds of them, and that 3 of them are darted out by Jupiter. Of these, the Romans retained only 2, ascribing the diurnal kind to Jupiter, and the nocturnal to Simanus, this latter kind being more rare, in consequence of the heavens being colder, as was mentioned above. The Etrurians also suppose that those which are named infernal burst out of the ground. They are produced in the winter and are particularly fierce and direful, as all things are which proceed from the earth, and are not generated by or proceeding from the stars, but from a cause which is near at hand, and of a more disorderly nature. As a proof of this, it is said that all those which proceed from the higher regions strike obliquely, while those which are termed terrestrial strike in a direct line. And because these fall from matter which is nearer to us, they are supposed to proceed from the earth, since they leave no traces of a rebound, this being the effect of a stroke coming not from below, but from an opposite quarter. Those who have searched into the subject more minutely suppose that these come from the planet Saturn, as those that are of a burning nature do from Mars. In this way it was that Volsinium, the most opulent town of the Tuscans, was entirely consumed by lightning. The first of these strokes that a man receives, after he has come into possession of any property, is termed familiar, and is supposed to prognosticate the events of the whole of his life. But it is not generally supposed that they predict events of a private nature for a longer space than 10 years, unless they happen at the time of a first marriage or a birthday, nor that public predictions extend beyond 30 years, unless with respect to the founding of colonies. Chapter 54. Of conjuring up thunder. It is related in our annals that by certain sacred rites and imprecations, thunderstorms may be compelled or invoked. There is an old report in Etruria that thunder was invoked when the city of Volsinium had its territory laid waste by a monster named Volta. Thunder was also invoked by King Porsenna, and El Piso, a very respectable author, states in the first book of his annals that this had been frequently done before his time by Numa, and that Tullus Hostilius, imitating him, but not having properly performed the ceremonies, was struck with lightning. We also have groves and altars and sacred places, and among the titles of Jupiter, as Stator, Tonans, and Feretrius, we have a Jupiter Elysius. The opinions entertained on this point are very various, and depend much on the dispositions of different individuals. To believe that we can command nature is the mark of a bold mind, nor is it less the mark of a feeble one to reject her kindness. Our knowledge has been so far useful to us in the interpretation of thunder, that it enables us to predict what is to happen on a certain day, and we learn either that our fortune is to be entirely changed, or it discloses events which are concealed from us, as is proved by an infinite number of examples, public and private. Wherefore, let these things remain, according to the order of nature, to some persons certain, to others doubtful, by some approved, by others condemned. I must not, however, omit the other circumstances connected with them which deserve to be related. Chapter 55. General Laws of Lightning. It is certain that the lightning is seen before the thunder is heard, although they both take place at the same time. Nor is this wonderful, since light has a greater velocity than sound. Nature so regulates it that the stroke and the sound coincide. The sound is, however, produced by the discharge of the thunder, not by its stroke. But the air is impelled quicker than the lightning, on which account it is that everything is shaken and blown up before it is struck, and that a person is never injured when he has seen the lightning and heard the thunder. Thunder on the left hand is supposed to be lucky, because the east is on the left side of the heavens. We do not regard so much the mode in which it comes to us as that in which it leaves us, whether the fire rebounds after the stroke, or whether the current of air returns when the operation is concluded and the fire is consumed. In relation to this object the Etrurians have divided the heavens into 16 parts. The first great division is from north to east, the second to the south, the third to the west, and the fourth occupies what remains from west to north. Each of these has been subdivided into 4 parts, of which the 8 on the east have been called the left, and those on the west the right divisions. Those which extend from the west to the north have been considered the most unpropitious. It becomes therefore very important to ascertain from what quarter the thunder proceeds, and in what direction it falls. It is considered a very favorable omen when it returns into the eastern divisions, but it prognosticates the greatest felicity when the thunder proceeds from the first mentioned part of the heavens and falls back into it. It was an omen of this kind which, as we have heard, was given to Sulla the dictator. The remaining quarters of the heavens are less propitious, and also less to be dreaded. There are some kinds of thunder which it is not thought right to speak of, or even listen to, unless when they have been disclosed to the master of a family or to a parent. But the futility of this observation was detected when the temple of Juno was struck at Rome during the consulship of Scaurus, he who was afterwards the prince of the Senate. It lightens without thunder more frequently in the night than in the day. Man is the only animal that is not always killed by it, all other animals being killed instantly, nature having granted to him this mark of distinction, while so many other animals excel him in strength. All animals fall down on the opposite side to that which has been struck. Man, unless he be thrown down on the parts that are struck, does not expire. Those who are struck directly from above sink down immediately. When a man is struck while he is awake, he is found with his eyes closed, when asleep, with them open. It is not considered proper that a man killed in this way should be burnt on the funeral pile. Our religion enjoins us to bury the body in the earth. No animal is consumed by lightning unless after having been previously killed. The parts of the animal that have been wounded by lightning are colder than the rest of the body. End of section 9. Recording by Christina Vasilevsky of www.105creations.com.
Section 10 of The Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 10. Chapter 56. Objects which are never struck. Among the productions of the earth, thunder never strikes the laurel, nor does it descend more than 5 feet into the earth. Those therefore who are timid consider the deepest caves as the most safe, or tents made of the skins of the animal called the sea-calf, since this is the only marine animal which is never struck, as is the case among birds with the eagle. On this account it is represented as the bearer of this weapon. In Italy, between Terracina and the temple of Feronia, the people have left off building towers in time of war, every one of them having been destroyed by thunderbolts. Chapter 57. Showers of milk, blood, flesh, iron, wool, and baked tiles. Besides these, we learn from certain monuments that from the lower part of the atmosphere it rained milk and blood in the consulship of M. Achilles and C. Porcius, and frequently at other times. This was the case with respect to flesh in the consulship of P. Volumnius and Servius Sulpicius, and it is said that what was not devoured by the birds did not become putrid. It also rained iron among the Lucanians, the year before Crassus was slain by the Parthians, as well as all the Lucanian soldiers, of whom there was a great number in this army. The substance which fell had very much the appearance of sponge. The augurs warned the people against wounds that might come from above. In the consulship of L. Paulus and C. Marcellus it rained wool round the castle of Carusanum, near which place a year after T. Annius Milo was killed. It is recorded among the transactions of that year that when he was pleading his own cause there was a shower of baked tiles. Chapter 58. Rattling of arms and the sound of trumpets heard in the sky. We have heard that during the war with the Cimbri the rattling of arms and the sound of trumpets were heard through the sky, and that the same thing has frequently happened before and since. Also that in the third consulship of Marius armies were seen in the heavens by the Amarini and the Teudertes, encountering each other as if from the east and west, and that those from the east were repelled. It is not at all wonderful for the heavens themselves to be in flames, and it has been more frequently observed when the clouds have taken up a great deal of fire. Chapter 59. Of stones that have fallen from the clouds, the opinion of Anaxagoras respecting them. The Greeks boast that Anaxagoras, the Clazomenian, in the second year of the 78th Olympiad, from his knowledge of what relates to the heavens, had predicted that at a certain time a stone would fall from the sun. And the thing accordingly happened in the daytime in a part of Thrace, at the river Agos. The stone is now to be seen, a wagon load in size and of a burnt appearance. There was also a comet shining in the night at that time. But to believe that this had been predicted would be to admit that the divining powers of Anaxagoras were still more wonderful, and that our knowledge of the nature of things, and indeed everything else, would be thrown into confusion were we to suppose either that the sun is itself composed of stone, or that there was even a stone in it. Yet there can be no doubt that stones have frequently fallen from the atmosphere. There is a stone, a small one indeed, at this time in the gymnasium of Abydos, which on this account is held in veneration, and which the same Anaxagoras predicted would fall in the middle of the earth. There is another at Cassandria, formerly called Posidea, which from this circumstance was built in that place. I have myself seen one in the country of the Vocontii, which had been brought from the fields only a short time before. Chapter 60. The Rainbow. What we name rainbows frequently occur, and are not considered either wonderful or ominous, for they do not predict with certainty either rain or fair weather. It is obvious that the rays of the sun being projected upon a hollow cloud, the light is thrown back to the sun and is refracted, and that the variety of colours is produced by a mixture of clouds, air, and fire. The rainbow is certainly never produced except in the part opposite to the sun, nor even in any other form except that of a semicircle. Nor are they ever formed at night, although Aristotle asserts that they are sometimes seen at that time. He acknowledges, however, that it can only be on the 14th day of the moon. They are seen in the winter the most frequently, when the days are shortening, after the autumnal equinox. They are not seen when the days increase again, after the vernal equinox, nor on the longest days about the summer solstice, but frequently at the winter solstice, when the days are the shortest. When the sun is low they are high, and when the sun is high they are low. They are smaller when in the east or west, but are spread out wider. In the south they are small, but of a greater span. In the summer they are not seen at noon, but after the autumnal equinox at any hour. There are never more than two seen at once. Chapter 61. The nature of hail, snow, hoar, mist, dew, the forms of clouds. I do not find that there is any doubt entertained respecting the following points. Hail is produced by frozen rain, and snow by the same fluid less firmly concreted, and hoar by frozen dew. During the winter snow falls, but not hail. Hail itself falls more frequently during the day than the night, and is more quickly melted than snow. There are no mists either in the summer or during the greatest cold of winter. There is neither dew nor hoar formed during great heat or winds, nor unless the night be serene. Fluids are diminished in bulk by being frozen, and, when the ice is melted, we do not obtain the same quantity of fluid as at first. The clouds are varied in their colour and figure according as the fire which they contain is in excess or is absorbed by them. Chapter 62. the peculiarities of the weather in different places. There are, moreover, certain peculiarities in certain places. In Africa, dew falls during the night in summer. In Italy, at Locri and at the lake Velenum, there is never a day in which a rainbow is not seen. At Rhodes and at Syracuse the sky is never so covered with clouds but that the sun is visible at one time or another. These things, however, will be better detailed in their proper place. So far respecting the air. Chapter 63. Nature of the earth. Next comes the earth, on which alone of all parts of nature we have bestowed the name that implies maternal veneration. It is appropriated to man as the heavens are to God. She receives us at our birth, nourishes us when born, and ever afterwards supports us. Lastly, embracing us in her bosom when we are rejected by the rest of nature, she then covers us with especial tenderness, rendered sacred to us, inasmuch as she renders us sacred, bearing our monuments and titles, continuing our names and extending our memory, in opposition to the shortness of life. In our anger we imprecate her on those who are now no more, as if we were ignorant that she is the only being who can never be angry with man. The water passes into shower, is concreted into hail, swells into rivers, is precipitated in torrents. The air is condensed into clouds, rages in squalls. But the earth, kind, mild, and indulgent as she is, and always ministering to the wants of mortals, how many things do we compel her to produce spontaneously? What odours and flowers, nutritive juices, forms and colours! With what good faith does she render back all that has been entrusted to her! It is the vital spirit which must bear the blame of producing noxious animals, for the earth is constrained to receive the seeds of them, and to support them when they are produced. The fault lies in the evil nature which generates them. The earth will no longer harbour a serpent after it has attacked any one, and thus she even demands punishment in the name of those who are indifferent about it themselves. She pours forth a profusion of medicinal plants, and is always producing something for the use of man. We may even suppose that it is out of compassion to us that she has ordained certain substances to be poisonous, in order that when we are weary of life, hunger, a mode of death the most foreign to the kind disposition of the earth, might not consume us by a slow decay, that precipices might not lacerate our mangled bodies, that the unseemly punishment of the halter may not torture us, by stopping the breath of one who seeks his own destruction, or that we may not seek our death in the ocean, and become food for our graves, or that our bodies may not be gashed by steel. On this account it is that nature has produced a substance which is very easily taken, and by which life is extinguished, the body remaining undefiled and retaining all its blood, and only causing a degree of thirst. And when it is destroyed by this means, neither bird nor beast will touch the body, but he who has perished by his own hands is reserved for the earth. But it must be acknowledged that everything which the earth has produced, as a remedy for our evils, we have converted into the poison of our lives. For do we not use iron, which we cannot do without, for this purpose? But although this cause of mischief has been produced, we ought not to complain. We ought not to be ungrateful to this one part of nature. How many luxuries and how many insults does she not bear for us? She is cast into the sea, and, in order that we may introduce seas into her bosom, she is washed away by the waves. She is continually tortured for her iron, her timber, stone, fire, corn, and is even much more subservient to our luxuries than to our mere support. What indeed she endures on her surface might be tolerated, but we penetrate also into her bowels, digging out the veins of gold and silver, and the ores of copper and lead. We also search for gems and certain small pebbles, driving our trenches to a great depth. We tear out her entrails in order to extract the gems with which we may load our fingers. How many hands are worn down that one little joint may be ornamented! If the infernal regions really existed, certainly these burrows of avarice and luxury would have penetrated into them. And truly we wonder that this same earth should have produced anything noxious. But I suppose the savage beasts protect her and keep off our sacrilegious hands. For do we not dig among serpents and handle poisonous plants along with those veins of gold? But the goddess shows herself more propitious to us, inasmuch as all this wealth ends in crimes, slaughter, and war, and that while we drench her with our blood, we cover her with unburied bones, and being covered with these, and her anger being thus appeased, she conceals the crimes of mortals. I consider the ignorance of her nature as one of the evil effects of an ungrateful mind. Chapter 64. Of the form of the earth. Every one agrees that it has the most perfect figure. We always speak of the ball of the earth, and we admit it to be a globe bounded by the poles. It has not indeed the form of an absolute sphere, from the number of lofty mountains and flat plains, but if the termination of the lines be bounded by a curve, this would compose a perfect sphere. And this we learn from arguments drawn from the nature of things, although not from the same considerations which we made use of with respect to the heavens. For in these the hollow convexity everywhere bends on itself, and leans upon the earth as its centre; whereas the earth rises up solid and dense, like something that swells up and is protruded outwards. The heavens bend towards the centre, while the earth goes from the centre, the continual rolling of the heavens about it forcing its immense globe into the form of a sphere. Chapter 65. Whether there be antipodes. On this point there is a great contest between the learned and the vulgar. We maintain that there are men dispersed over every part of the earth, that they stand with their feet turned towards each other, and that the vault of the heavens appears alike to all of them, and that they, all of them, appear to tread equally on the middle of the earth. If any one should ask why those situated opposite to us do not fall, we directly ask in return whether those on the opposite side do not wonder that we do not fall. But I may make a remark that will appear plausible even to the most unlearned, that if the earth were of the figure of an unequal globe, like the seed of a pine, still it may be inhabited in every part. But of how little moment is this, when we have another miracle rising up to our notice. The earth itself is pendant, and does not fall with us. It is doubtful whether this be from the force of the spirit which is contained in the universe, or whether it would fall, did not nature resist, by allowing of no place where it might fall. For as the seed of fire is nowhere but in fire, nor of water except in water, nor of air except in air, so there is no situation for the earth except in itself, everything else repelling it. It is indeed wonderful that it should form a globe, when there is so much flat surface of the sea and of the plains. And this was the opinion of Dicaearchus, a peculiarly learned man, who measured the heights of mountains under the direction of the kings, and estimated Pelion, which is the highest, at 1250 paces perpendicular, and considered this as not affecting the round figure of the globe. But this appears to me to be doubtful, as I well know that the summits of some of the Alps rise up by a long space of not less than 50,000 paces. But what the vulgar most strenuously contend against is, to be compelled to believe that the water is forced into a rounded figure. Yet there is nothing more obvious to the sight among the phenomena of nature. For we see everywhere that drops, when they hang down, assume the form of small globes, and when they are covered with dust, or have the down of leaves spread over them, they are observed to be completely round. And when a cup is filled, the liquid swells up in the middle. But on account of the subtle nature of the fluid and its inherent softness, the fact is more easily ascertained by our reason than by our sight. And it is even more wonderful, that if a very little fluid only be added to a cup when it is full, the superfluous quantity runs over, whereas the contrary happens if we add a solid body, even as much as would weigh 20 denarii. The reason of this is, that what is dropped in raises up the fluid at the top, while what is poured on it slides off from the projecting surface. It is from the same cause that the land is not visible from the body of a ship when it may be seen from the mast, and that when a vessel is receding, if any bright object be fixed to the mast, it seems gradually to descend and finally to become invisible. And the ocean, which we admit to be without limits, if it had any other figure, could it cohere and exist without falling, there being no external margin to contain it? And the same wonder still recurs, how is it that the extreme parts of the sea, although it be in the form of a globe, do not fall down? In opposition to which doctrine, the Greeks, to their great joy and glory, were the first to teach us, by their subtle geometry, that this could not happen, even if the seas were flat, and of the figure which they appear to be. For since water always runs from a higher to a lower level, and this is admitted to be essential to it, no one ever doubted that the water would accumulate on any shore, as much as its slope would allow it. It is also certain that the lower anything is, so much the nearer is it to the centre, and that all the lines which are drawn from this point to the water which is nearest to it are shorter than those which reach from the beginning of the sea to its extreme parts. Hence it follows that all the water from every part tends towards the centre, and, because it has this tendency, does not fall. Chapter 66. How the water is connected with the earth. Of the navigation of the sea and the rivers. We must believe that the great artist Nature has so arranged it, that as the arid and dry earth cannot subsist by itself and without moisture, nor, on the other hand, can the water subsist unless it be supported by the earth, they are connected by a mutual union. The earth opens her harbours, while the water pervades the whole earth, within, without, and above. Its veins running in all directions, like connecting links, and bursting out on even the highest ridges, where, forced up by the air, and pressed out by the weight of the earth, it shoots forth as from a pipe, and is so far from being in danger of falling, that it bounds up to the highest and most lofty places. Hence the reason is obvious why the seas are not increased by the daily accession of so many rivers. The earth has therefore the whole of its globe girt on every side by the sea flowing round it, and this is not a point to be investigated by arguments, but what has been ascertained by experience. End of section 10. Section 11 of The Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Anna Simon. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Riley. Section 11. Chapter 67. Whether the ocean surrounds the earth. The whole of the Western Ocean is now navigated, from Gades and the Pillars of Hercules round Spain and Gaul. The greater part of the Northern Ocean has also been navigated, under the auspices of the Emperor Augustus, his fleet having been carried round Germany to the promontory of the Cimbri, from which spot they descried an immense sea, or became acquainted with it by report, which extends to the country of the Scythians, and the districts that are chilled by excessive moisture. On this account it is not at all probable that the ocean should be deficient in a region where moisture so much abounds. In like manner, towards the east, from the Indian Sea, all that part which lies in the same latitude, and which bends round towards the Caspian, has been explored by the Macedonian arms in the reigns of Seleucus and Antiochus, who wished it to be named after themselves the Seleucian or Antiochian Sea. About the Caspian, too, many parts of the shores of the ocean have been explored, so that nearly the whole of the north has been sailed over in one direction or another. Nor can our argument be much affected by the point that has been so much discussed respecting the Palus Miotis, whether it be a bay of the same ocean, as is, I understand, the opinion of some persons, or whether it be the overflowing of a narrow channel connected with a different ocean. On the other side of Gades, proceeding from the same western point, a great part of the Southern Ocean along Mauritania has now been navigated. Indeed, the greater part of this region, as well as of the east, as far as the Arabian Gulf, was surveyed in consequence of Alexander's victories. When Caius Caesar, the son of Augustus, had the conduct of affairs in that country, it is said that they found the remains of Spanish vessels which had been wrecked there. While the power of Carthage was at its height, Hanno published an account of a voyage which he made from Gades to the extremity of Arabia. Himilco was also sent about the same time to explore the remote parts of Europe. Besides, we learn from Cornelius Nepos that one Eudoxus, a contemporary of his, when he was flying from King Lathyrus, set out from the Arabian Gulf and was carried as far as Gades. And long before him, Caelius Antipater informs us that he had seen a person who had sailed from Spain to Ethiopia for the purposes of trade. The same Cornelius Nepos, when speaking of the northern circumnavigation, tells us that Q. Metellus Sylla, the colleague of L. Afranius in the consulship, but then a proconsul in Gaul, had a present made to him by the king of the Suevi, of certain Indians, who, sailing from India for the purpose of commerce, had been driven by tempests into Germany. Thus it appears that the seas which flow completely round the globe, and divide it, as it were, into two parts, exclude us from one part of it, as there is no way open to it on either side. And as the contemplation of these things is adapted to detect the vanity of mortals, it seems incumbent on me to display and lay open to our eyes the whole of it, whatever it be, in which there is nothing which can satisfy the desires of certain individuals. Chapter 68. What part of the earth is inhabited? In the first place, then, it appears that this should be estimated at half the globe, as if no portion of this half was encroached upon by the ocean. But surrounding as it does the whole of the land, pouring out and receiving all the other waters, furnishing whatever goes to the clouds, and feeding the stars themselves, so numerous and of such great size as they are, what a great space must we not suppose it to occupy? This vast mass must fill up and occupy an infinite extent. To this we must add that portion of the remainder which the heavens take from us. For the globe is divided into 5 parts, termed zones, and all that portion is subject to severe cold and perpetual frost which is under the 2 extremities, about each of the poles, the nearer of which is called the north, and the opposite the south pole. In all these regions there is perpetual darkness, and, in consequence of the aspect of the milder stars being turned from them, the light is malignant, and only like the whiteness which is produced by hoar frost. The middle of the earth, over which is the orbit of the sun, is parched and burned by the flame, and is consumed by being so near the heat. There are only 2 of the zones which are temperate, those which lie between the torrid and the frigid zones, and these are separated from each other in consequence of the scorching heat of the heavenly bodies. It appears therefore that the heavens take from us 3 parts of the earth. How much the ocean steals is uncertain. And with respect to the part which is left us, I do not know whether that is not even in greater danger. This same ocean, insinuating itself, as I have described it, into a number of bays, approaches with its roaring so near the inland seas that the Arabian Gulf is no more than 115 miles from the Egyptian Sea, and the Caspian only 375 miles from the Euxine. It also insinuates itself into the numerous seas by which it separates Africa, Europe, and Asia. Hence, how much space must it occupy? We must also take into account the extent of all the rivers and the marshes, and we must add the lakes and the pools. There are also the mountains raised up to the heavens with their precipitous fronts. We must also subtract the forests and the craggy valleys, the wildernesses and the places which from various causes are desert. The vast quantity which remains of the earth, or rather, as many persons have considered it, this speck of a world, for the earth is no more in regard to the universe, this is the object, the seat of our glory. Here we bear our honours, here we exercise our power, here we covet wealth, here we mortals create our disturbances, here we continually carry on our wars, aye, civil wars even, and unpeople the earth by mutual slaughter. And not to dwell on public feuds entered into by nations against each other, here it is that we drive away our neighbours, and enclose the land thus seized upon within our own fence, and yet the man who has most extended his boundary, and has expelled the inhabitants for ever so great a distance, after all, what mighty portion of the earth is he master of? And even when his avarice has been the most completely satisfied, what part of it can he take with him into the grave? Chapter 69. That the earth is in the middle of the world. It is evident from undoubted arguments that the earth is in the middle of the universe, but it is the most clearly proved by the equality of the days and the nights at the equinox. It is demonstrated by the quadrant, which affords the most decisive confirmation of the fact, that unless the earth was in the middle, the days and nights could not be equal. For at the time of the equinox the rising and setting of the sun are seen on the same line, and the rising of the sun at the summer solstice is on the same line with its setting at the winter solstice. But this could not happen if the earth was not situated in the centre. Chapter 70. Of the obliquity of the zones. The 3 circles, which are connected with the above-mentioned zones, distinguish the inequalities of the seasons. These are the solstitial circle, which proceeds from the part of the zodiac the highest to us, and approaching the nearest to the district of the north; on the other side the brumal, which is towards the south pole; and the equinoxial, which traverses the middle of the zodiac. Chapter 71. Of the inequality of climates. The cause of the other things which are worthy of our admiration depends on the figure of the earth itself, which, together with all its waters, is proved, by the same arguments, to be a globe. This certainly is the cause why the stars of the northern portion of the heavens never set to us, and why, on the other hand, those in the south never rise, and again why the latter can never be seen by the former, the globe of the earth rising up and concealing them. The northern wane is never seen in Troglodytice, nor in Egypt, which borders on it; nor can we in Italy see the star Canopus, or Berenice's Hare, nor what under the Emperor Augustus was named Caesar's throne, although they are there very brilliant stars. The curved form of the earth is so obvious, rising up like a ridge, that Canopus appears to a spectator at Alexandria to rise above the horizon almost a quarter of a sign. The same star at Rhodes appears, as it were, to graze along the earth, while in Pontus it is not seen at all, where the northern wane appears considerably elevated. This same constellation cannot be seen at Rhodes, and still less at Alexandria. In Arabia, in the month of November, it is concealed during the first watch of the night, but may be seen during the second. In Meroe it is seen for a short time in the evening at the solstice, and it is visible at daybreak for a few days before the rising of Arcturus. These facts have been principally ascertained by the expeditions of navigators, the sea appearing more elevated or depressed in certain parts, the stars suddenly coming into view and, as it were, emerging from the water, after having been concealed by the bulging out of the globe. But the heavens do not, as some suppose, rise higher at one pole, otherwise its stars would be seen from all parts of the world. They indeed are supposed to be higher by those who are nearest to them, but the stars are sunk below the horizon to those who are more remote. As this pole appears to be elevated to those who are beneath it, so when we have passed along the convexity of the earth, those stars rise up, which appear elevated to the inhabitants of those other districts. All this, however, could not happen unless the earth had the shape of a globe. Chapter 72. In what places eclipses are invisible, and why this is the case. Hence it is that the inhabitants of the East do not see those eclipses of the sun or of the moon which occur in the evening, nor the inhabitants of the West those in the morning, while such as take place at noon are more frequently visible. We are told that at the time of the famous victory of Alexander the Great at Arbela the moon was eclipsed at the second hour of the night, while in Sicily the moon was rising at the same hour. The eclipse of the sun which occurred the day before the calends of May, in the consulship of Vipstanus and Fonteius, not many years ago, was seen in Campania between the 7th and 8th hour of the day. The General Corbulo informs us that it was seen in Armenia between the 11th and 12th hour. Thus the curve of the globe both reveals and conceals different objects from the inhabitants of its different parts. If the earth had been flat, everything would have been seen at the same time, from every part of it, and the nights would not have been unequal, while the equal intervals of 12 hours, which are now observed only in the middle of the earth, would in that case have been the same everywhere. Chapter 73. What regulates the daylight on the earth? Hence it is that there is not any one night and day the same in all parts of the earth at the same time, the intervention of the globe producing night, and its turning round producing day. This is known by various observations. In Africa and in Spain it is made evident by the towers of Hannibal, and in Asia by the beacons, which, in consequence of their dread of pirates, the people erected for their protection. For it has been frequently observed that the signals which were lighted at the 6th hour of the day were seen at the 3rd hour of the night by those who were the most remote. Philonides, a courier of the above-mentioned Alexander, went from Sicyon to Elis, a distance of 1200 stadia, in 9 hours, while he seldom returned until the 3rd hour of the night, although the road was downhill. The reason is that, in going, he followed the course of the sun, while on his return, in the opposite direction, he met the sun and left it behind him. For the same reason it is that those who sail to the west, even on the shortest day, compensate for the difficulty of sailing in the night and go farther, because they sail in the same direction with the sun. Chapter 74. Remarks on dials as connected with this subject. The same dial plates cannot be used in all places, the shadow of the sun being sensibly different at distances of 300, or at most of 500 stadia. Hence the shadow of the dial pin, which is termed the gnomon, at noon and at the summer solstice in Egypt is little more than half the length of the gnomon itself. At the city of Rome it is only 1/9 less than the gnomon, at Ancona not more than 1 in 55 parts less, while in the part of Italy which is called Venetia, at the same hour the shadow is equal to the length of the gnomon. Chapter 75. When and where there are no shadows. It is likewise said that in the town of Syene, which is 5000 stadia south of Alexandria, there is no shadow at noon on the day of the solstice, and that a well which was sunk for the purpose of the experiment is illuminated by the sun in every part. Hence it appears that the sun in this place is vertical, and Onesicritus informs us that this is the case, about the same time in India at the river Hippasis. It is well known that at Berenice, a city of troglodyte, and 4820 stadia beyond that city, in the same country, at the town of Ptolemais, which was built on the Red Sea, when the elephant was first hunted, this same thing takes place for 45 days before the solstice and for an equal length of time after it, and that during these 90 days the shadows are turned towards the south. Again, at Meroe, an island in the Nile and the metropolis of the Ethiopians, which is 5000 stadia from Syene, there are no shadows at 2 periods of the year, that is, when the sun is in the 18th degree of Taurus and in the 14th of Leo. The Orties, a people of India, have a mountain named Malleus, near which the shadows in summer fall towards the south and in winter towards the north. The 7 stars of the Great Bear are visible there for 15 nights only. In India also, in the celebrated seaport Patali, the sun rises to the right hand and the shadows fall towards the south. While Alexander was staying there, it was observed that the 7 northern stars were seen only during the early part of the night. Onesicritus, one of his generals, informs us in his work that in those places in India where there are no shadows, the 7 stars are not visible. These places, he says, are called Askya, and the people there do not reckon the time by hours. Chapter 76. Where this takes place twice in the year, and where the shadows fall in opposite directions. Eratosthenes informs us that in the whole of Troglodytice, for twice 45 days in the year, the shadows fall in the contrary direction. Chapter 77. Where the days are the longest and where the shortest. Hence it follows that, in consequence of the daylight increasing in various degrees, in Meroe the longest day consists of 12 equinoctial hours and 8 parts of an hour; at Alexandria of 14 hours; in Italy of 15; in Britain of 17. Where the degree of light which exists in the night very clearly proves what the reason of the thing also obliges us to believe, that, during the solstitial period, as the sun approaches to the pole of the world, and his orbit is contracted, the parts of the earth that lie below him have a day of 6 months long, and a night of equal length when he is removed to the south pole. Pytheas, of Marseilles, informs us that this is the case in the island of Thule, which is 6 days' sail from the north of Britain. Some persons also affirm that this is the case in Mona, which is about 200 miles from Camalodunum, a town of Britain. End of section 11.
Section 12 of The Natural History, Volume 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Bianca. The Natural History, Volume 1, by Pliny the Elder. Translated by John Bostock and Henry Thomas Wiley. Section 12. Chapter 78 of the First Dial. Anaximenes, the Milesian, the disciple of Anaximander, of whom I have spoken above, discovered the theory of shadows and what is called the art of dialing, and he was the first who exhibited at Lacedaemon the dial which they call Sciothericon. Chapter 79 of the mode in which the days are computed. The days have been computed by different people in different ways. The Babylonians reckoned from one sunrise to the next, the Athenians from one sunset to the next, the Umbrians from noon to noon, the multitude universally from light to darkness. The Roman priests and those who presided over the civil day, also the Egyptians and Hipparchus, from midnight to midnight. It appears that the interval from one sunrise to the next is less near the solstices than near the equinoxes, because the position of the zodiac is more oblique about its middle part and more straight near the solstice. Chapter 80 of the difference of nations as depending on the nature of the world. To these circumstances we must add those that are connected with certain celestial causes. There can be no doubt that the Ethiopians are scorched by their vicinity to the sun's heat, and they are born like persons who have been burned, with the beard and hair frizzled, while in the opposite and frozen parts of the earth there are nations with white skins and long light hair. The latter are savage from the inclemency of the climate, while the former are dull from its variableness. We learn from the form of the legs that in the one the fluids, like vapor, are forced into the upper parts of the body, while in the other, being a gross humour, it is drawn downwards into the lower parts. In the cold regions, savage beasts are produced, and in the others, various forms of animals and many kinds of birds. In both situations the body grows tall, in the one case by the force of fire, and in the other by the nutritive moisture. In the middle of the earth there is a salutary mixture of the two, a tract fruitful in all things, the habits of the body holding a mean between the two, with a proper tempering of colours. The manners of the people are gentle, the intellect clear, the genius fertile, and capable of comprehending every part of nature. They have formed empires, which has never been done by the remote nations, yet these latter have never been subjected by the former, being severed from them and remaining solitary, from the effect produced on them by their savage nature. Chapter 81 of Earthquakes. According to the doctrine of the Babylonians, earthquakes and cleft of the earth and occurrences of this kind are supposed to be produced by the influence of the stars, especially of the three to which they ascribed thunder, and to be caused by the stars moving with the sun, or being in conjunction with it, and more particularly when they are in the quartile aspect. If we are to credit the report, a most admirable and immortal spirit, as it were of a divine nature, should be ascribed to Anaximander the Milesian, who, they say, warned the Lacedaemonians to beware of their city and their houses. For he predicted that an earthquake was at hand, when both the whole of their city was destroyed, and a large portion of Mount Taygetos, which projected in the form of a ship, was broken off and added farther ruin to the previous destruction. Another prediction is ascribed to Pherecydes, the master of Pythagoras, and this was divine. By a draught of water from a well, he foresaw and predicted that there would be an earthquake in that place. And if these things be true, how nearly do these individuals approach to the deity, even during their lifetime? But I leave everyone to judge of these matters as he pleases. I certainly conceive the winds to be the cause of earthquakes, for the earth never trembles except when the sea is quite calm, and when the heavens are so tranquil that the birds cannot maintain their flight, all the air which should support them being withdrawn, nor does it ever happen until after great winds, the gust being pent up, as it were, in the fissures and concealed hollows. For the trembling of the earth resembles thunder in the clouds, nor does the yawning of the earth differ from the bursting of the lightning, the enclosed air struggling and striving to escape. Chapter 82 of Clefts of the Earth. The earth is shaken in various ways, and wonderful effects are produced. In one place the walls of cities being thrown down, and in others swallowed up by a deep cleft. Sometimes great masses of earth are heaped up, and rivers forced out, sometimes even flame and hot springs, and at others the course of rivers is turned. A terrible noise precedes and accompanies the shock, sometimes a murmuring like the lowing of cattle, or like human voices, or the clashing of arms. This depends on the substance which receives the sound, and the shape of the caverns or crevices through which it issues, it being more shrill from a narrow opening, more hoarse from one that is curved, producing a loud reverberation from hard bodies, a sound like boiling fluid from moist substances, fluctuating in stagnant water, and roaring when forced against solid bodies. There is, therefore, often the sound without any motion. Nor is it a simple motion, but one that is tremulous and vibratory. The cleft sometimes remains, displaying what it has swallowed up, sometimes concealing it, the mouth being closed and the soil being brought over it, so that no vestige is left, the city being, as it were, devoured, and the tract of country engulfed. Maritime districts are more especially subject to shocks. Nor are mountainous tracts exempt from them. I have found, by my inquiries, that the Alps and the Apennines are frequently shaken. The shocks happen more frequently in the autumn and in the spring, as is the case also with thunder. There are seldom shocks in Gaul and in Egypt. In the latter, it depends on the prevalence of summer, in the former, of winter. They also happen more frequently in the night than in the day. The greatest shocks are in the morning and the evening, but they often take place at daybreak and sometimes at noon. They also take place during eclipses of the sun and of the moon, because at that time storms are lulled. They are most frequent when great heat succeeds to showers, or showers succeed to great heat. Chapter 83 Signs of an approaching earthquake. There is no doubt that earthquakes are felt by persons on shipboard, as they are struck by a sudden motion of the waves, without these being raised by any gust of wind. And things that are in the vessel shake as they do in houses, and give notice by their creaking. Also the birds, when they settle upon the vessels, are not without their alarms. There is also a sign in the heavens, for, when a shock is near at hand, either in the daytime or a little after sunset, a cloud is stretched out in the clear sky, like a long, thin line. The water in wells is also more turbid than usual, and it emits a disagreeable odor. Chapter 84. Preservatives against future earthquakes. These same places, however, afford protection, and this is also the case where there is a number of caverns, for they give vent to the confined vapor, a circumstance which has been remarked in certain towns which have been less shaken where they have been excavated by many sewers. And in the same town, those parts that are excavated are safer than the other parts, as is understood to be the case at Naples in Italy, the part of it which is solid being more liable to injury. Arched buildings are also the most safe. Also the angles of walls, the shocks counteracting each other. Walls made of brick also suffer less from the shocks. There is also a great difference in the nature of the motions, where various motions are experienced. It is the safest when it vibrates and causes a creaking in the building, and where it swells and rises upwards and settles with an alternate motion. It is also harmless when the buildings coming together butt against each other in opposite directions, for the motions counteract each other. A movement like the rolling of waves is dangerous, or when the motion is impelled in one direction. The tremors cease when the vapor bursts out, but if they do not soon cease, they continue for 40 days, generally indeed for a longer time. Some have lasted even for 1 or 2 years. Chapter 85. Prodigies of the earth which have occurred once only. A great prodigy of the earth, which never happened more than once, I have found mentioned in the books of the Etruscan ceremonies, as having taken place in the district of Mutina, during the consulship of Lucius Marcius and Sextus Julius. 2 mountains rushed together, falling upon each other with a very loud crash and then receding, while in the daytime flame and smoke issued from them, a great crowd of Roman knights and families of people and travelers on the Emilian Way being spectators of it. All the farmhouses were thrown down by the shock, and a great number of animals that were in them were killed. It was in the year before the social war, and I am in doubt whether this event or the civil commotions were more fatal to the territory of Italy. The prodigy, which happened in our own age, was no less wonderful. In the last year of the Emperor Nero, as I have related in my history of his times, when certain fields and olive grounds in the district of Marucinum, belonging to Vactius Marcellus, a Roman knight, the steward of Nero, changed places with each other, although the public highway was interposed. Chapter 86. Wonderful circumstances attending earthquakes. Inundations of the sea take place at the same time with earthquakes, the water being impregnated with the same spirit, and received into the bosom of the earth, which subsides. The greatest earthquake which has occurred in our memory was in the reign of Tiberius, by which 12 cities of Asia were laid prostrate in one night. They occurred the most frequently during the Punic War, when we had accounts brought to Rome of 57 earthquakes in the space of a single year. It was during this year that the Carthaginians and the Romans, who were fighting at the lake Trasimenus, were neither of them sensible of a very great shock during the battle. Nor is it an evil merely consisting in the danger which is produced by the motion. It is an equal or a greater evil when it is considered as a prodigy. The city of Rome never experienced a shock which was not the forerunner of some great calamity. Chapter 87. In what places the sea has receded. The same cause produces an increase of the land, the vapor, when it cannot burst out, forcibly lifting up the surface. For the land is not merely produced by what is brought down from the rivers, as the islands called Echinates are formed by the river Achelous, and the greater part of Egypt by the Nile, where, according to Homer, it was a day and a night's journey from the mainland to the island of Pharos, but in some cases by the receding of the sea, as according to the same author was the case with the Circaean islands. The same thing also happened in the harbour of Ambracia for a space of 10,000 paces, and was also said to have taken place for 5,000 at the Piraeus of Athens, and likewise at Ephesus, where formerly the sea washed the walls of the temple of Diana. Indeed, if we may believe Herodotus, the sea came beyond Memphis as far as the mountains of Ethiopia, and also from the plains of Arabia. The sea also surrounded Ilium and the whole of Tuthrania, and covered the plain through which the Meander flows. Chapter 88. The mode in which islands rise up. Land is sometimes formed in a different manner, rising suddenly out of the sea, as if nature was compensating the earth for its losses, restoring in one place what she had swallowed up in another. Chapter 89. What islands have been formed and at what periods. Delos and Rhodes, islands which have now long been famous, are recorded to have risen up in this way. More lately, there have been some smaller islands formed. Anapha, which is beyond Melos, Nia, between Lemnos and the Hellespont, Heloni, between Labados and Chios, Thera and Thracia, among the Cyclades, in the 4th year of the 135th Olympiad. And among the same islands, 130 years afterwards, Hiera, also called Automati, made its appearance, also Thea, at the distance of 2 stadia from the former, 110 years afterwards, in our own times, when M. Junius Silanus and L. Balbus were consuls, on the 8th of the Ides of July. Opposite to us, and near to Italy, among the Aeolian islands, an island emerged from the sea, and likewise one near Crete, 2,500 paces in extent, and with warm springs in it. Another made its appearance in the 3rd year of the 163rd Olympiad, in the Tuscan Gulf, burning with a violent explosion. There is a tradition, too, that a great number of fishes were floating about the spot, and that those who employed them for food immediately expired. It is said that the Pithecusan Islands rose up in the same way in the Bay of Campania, and that shortly afterwards the mountain Epopos, from which flame had suddenly burst forth, was reduced to the level of the neighboring plain. In the same island it is said that a town was sunk in the sea, that in consequence of another shock a lake burst out, and that by a third Prochytas was formed into an island, the neighboring mountains being rolled away from it. Chapter 90. Lands which have been separated by the sea. In the ordinary course of things, islands are also formed by this means. The sea has torn Sicily from Italy, Cyprus from Syria, Euboea from Boeotia, Atalante and Macris from Euboea, Besbicus from Bithynia, and Leucosia from the promontory of the Sirens. Chapter 91. Islands which have been united to the main land. Again, islands are taken from the sea and added to the mainland. Antissa to Lesbos, Cepherium to Halicarnassos, Aethusa to Mindes, Tromiscus and Perne to Miletus, Narthecusa to the promontory of Parthenium. Hybenda, which was formerly an island of Ionia, is now 200 stadia distant from the sea. Sirius is now become a part of Ephesus, and in the same neighborhood the Rhasides and Sophonia form part of Magnesia, while Epidaurus and Oricum are no longer islands. Chapter 92. Lands which have been totally changed into seas. The sea has totally carried off certain lands, and first of all, if we are to believe Plato, for an immense space where the Atlantic Ocean is now extended. More lately, we see what has been produced by our inland sea. Acarnania has been overwhelmed by the Ambracian Gulf, Achaia by the Corinthian, Europe and Asia by the Propontis and Pontus. And besides these, the sea has rent asunder Lucas, Anthurium, the Hellespont, and the two Bosphori. Chapter 93. Lands which have been swallowed up. And not to speak of bays and gulfs, the earth feeds on itself. It has devoured the very high mountain of Cybotus, with the town of Curites, also Sipylus in Magnesia, and formerly in the same place a very celebrated city, which was called Tantalis. Also the land belonging to the cities Galanis and Gamalis in Phoenicia, together with the cities themselves, also Phrygium, the most lofty ridge in Ethiopia. Nor are the shores of the sea more to be depended upon. Chapter 94. Cities which have been absorbed by the sea. The sea near the Pelis Meotis has carried away Pera and Antissa, also Elice and Bura in the Gulf of Corinth, traces of which places are visible in the ocean. From the island Sia it has seized on 30,000 paces, which were suddenly torn off, with many persons on them. In Sicily also the half of the city of Tyndaris, and all the part of Italy which is wanting. In like manner it carried off Eleusina in Boeotia. Chapter 95. Of Vents in the Earth. But let us say no more of earthquakes and of whatever may be regarded as the sepulchres of cities. Let us rather speak of the wonders of the earth than of the crimes of nature. But by Hercules, the history of the heavens themselves would not be more difficult to relate. The abundance of metals, so various, so rich, so prolific, rising up during so many ages, when, throughout all the world, so much is every day destroyed by fire, by waste, by shipwreck, by wars, and by frauds. And while so much is consumed by luxury and by such a number of people. The figures on gems, so multiplied in their forms, the variously colored spots on certain stones, and the whiteness of others, excluding everything except light, the virtues of medicinal springs, and the perpetual fires bursting out in so many places for so many ages, the exhalation of deadly vapors, either emitted from caverns or from certain unhealthy districts, some of them fatal to birds alone, as at Soracte, a district near the city, others to all animals except to man, while others are so to man also, as in the country of Sinuessa and Puteoli. They are generally called vents, and by some persons Charon's sewers, from their exhaling a deadly vapor. Also at Amsanctum, in the country of the Herpini, at the temple of Mephites, there is a place which kills all those who enter it. And the same takes place at Hierapolis in Asia, where no one can enter with safety, except the priest of the great mother of the gods. In other places there are prophetic caves, where those who are intoxicated with the vapor which rises from them predict future events, as at the most noble of all oracles, Delphi. In which cases, what mortal is there who can assign any other cause than the divine power of nature, which is everywhere diffused and thus bursts forth in various places? Chapter 96. Of certain lands which are always shaking, and of floating islands. There are certain lands which shake when anyone passes over them, as in the territory of the Gabii, not far from the city of Rome. There are about 200 acres which shake when cavalry passes over it. The same thing takes place at Riati. There are certain islands which are always floating, as in the territory of the Secubum, and of the above-mentioned Riati, of Mutina, and of Stetonia. In the lake of Vadimonis and the waters of Cutiliae there is a dark wood which is never seen in the same place for a day and a night together. In Lydia, the islands named Calaminae are not only driven about by the wind, but may be even pushed at pleasure from place to place by poles. Many citizens saved themselves by this means in the Mithridatic War. There are some small islands in the Nymphaeus called the Dancers, because, when choruses are sung, they are moved by the motions of those who beat time. In the great Italian lake of Tarquinii, there are 2 islands with groves on them, which are driven about by the wind, so as at one time to exhibit the figure of a triangle and at another of a circle, but they never form a square. End of section 12. Recorded by Bianca in Utrecht, the Netherlands, in January 2009.